Jesus says, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. And there's a lot of different ways to look at that verse. One way is if we love him, we'll naturally obey his commands. And I think that is actually a really good way to look at the verse. Growing up, it was more like the way that we show that we love him is to strive to obey his commands. But I think really it's more of coming from a place of, if we believe him, if we're trusting in him, if we have faith in him, if we believe that he is good and what he says is good and what he says leads to life, then we'll want to do that. We'll want to obey him, we'll want to follow him, and we will naturally walk in his ways. And whether or not we're walking in his ways is an indication of how much we believe him and how much we love him. And so with that, it's also important to know what his ways actually are. And so I was talking with a friend, and one of the things that I see in the church as something that we tend to justify a lot, and maybe it's just a hot button for me, but is sex outside of marriage. It seems like, I even was talking to somebody about this recently, and they were like, yeah, well, I mean, it's discouraged in the church to have sex outside of marriage, but everyone's doing it. And it's so sad to me. Yeah. Oh, it's so sad to me. But so Jesus says, pick up your cross and follow me. It is a sacrifice in some ways. I mean, it's not a sacrifice actually, because his ways are good and they lead to life, but it's not always what we want to do. His ways are not our ways. And so in that sense, it is a sacrifice in terms of we might have to not do something that feels good in the moment for the greater benefit of life and of following him and of walking his ways, and which really leads to life. But so something that I see generally throughout the scriptures is one of the main things that separates believers from unbelievers is what we do with our sexuality. And I think one way of loving God is, Jesus says, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. So one way of loving God is obeying what he says, regardless of what other people are doing. What other people are doing doesn't actually matter. What other people think is fine doesn't actually matter. We're accountable to God. So make sure you check in with him first. And a lot of things are just plainly written in the Bible of this is right and this is not right, and this will lead to life and this will lead to death. And there are a lot of things that aren't written in the Bible. With those things, check in with God. Ask him, how do you feel about this? And listen for his voice. So anyway, a way for us to see how much we love God, like a temperature gauge, is how much are we actually walking in his ways, and that'll show us. And if we're really wanting to love him more, if we're wanting to be in relationship with him more, and we are having trouble walking in his ways, I would say we cannot do it on our own, and we're not meant to do it on our own. And the things that we're doing, it's not actually, in my opinion, it's not actually about those things. It's more about the heart posture and believing God, wanting to walk in his ways, having faith in him and what he says, and he will help us. We need to desire him, desire his ways, and ask him to change our hearts, ask him to help lead us into truth. Whenever we're doing things that are not his ways, we're believing lies. So we need him to reveal truth to us, which the Holy Spirit does. The Holy Spirit leads us into all truth. So ask him, what lies are we believing to even be wanting to walk in these ways that aren't yours? And lead us into truth and show us, the benefit, show us why it leads to life, whatever you need to really have the desire to follow him. And ultimately we need him to change our hearts and give us the grace to walk in his ways. And he does. He gives us that grace. So anyway, just throwing that out there.